Where is the universe actually located, not where you think? Let me ask you something. Right now, as you're watching this, you believe you're inside a vast universe, don't you? Stars billions of light years away, galaxies spinning in the dark, an external cosmos stretching infinitely beyond you. You've spent your whole life believing you're a tiny observer, separate, looking out at this massive thing called reality. But what if I told you that's backwards? What if the universe you think is out there is actually inside you right now in this moment? I'm not speaking metaphorically. I'm not talking about some abstract spiritual concept. I'm talking about the literal physical location of the universe you experience. And here's the kicker. Science proves it. The greatest philosophers knew it. The mystics have been saying it for thousands of years. And now neuroscience has confirmed it in ways that will shake everything you thought you knew about reality. Most people never question this. They live their entire lives assuming the world exists independently out there. They see themselves as separate, isolated, a consciousness trapped inside a body looking out at an external universe. But here's what nobody tells you. That separation, it's an illusion, a convincing one. Maybe the most convincing illusion ever created. And the moment you see through it, really see through it, everything changes. So here's my question for you. Are you ready to discover where the universe actually is? Are you ready to have your sense of reality completely flipped? Because what I'm about to show you isn't just interesting. It's not just mind-bending. It's the truth that's been hidden in plain sight your entire life. Let's dive in. Let me tell you what most people believe. They believe in what I call the separation myth. It goes like this. There's an external world out there, solid, real, independent. And then there's me in here. My consciousness, my mind, my sense of self. Observing that world from inside my skull. Two separate things, the observer and the observed. Me and the universe. Sound familiar? This is how we're taught to see reality. From childhood, we're conditioned to believe in this fundamental split. The world is out there. I am in here. And never the two shall meet. But here's where it gets interesting. Some of the greatest minds in history have challenged this assumption. And I'm not talking about fringe thinkers or New Age gurus. I'm talking about the giants of Western philosophy. The people you studied in school. René Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, built his entire system on one radical idea. Cito ero sum. I think, therefore I am. What does that mean? It means the only thing you can be absolutely certain of is your own consciousness. Not the external world, not objects, not even your body. The one undeniable fact is that you are experiencing. You are aware. Descartes called this the primacy of consciousness. Everything else, every piece of knowledge, every perception has to start with the direct feeling of your own mind and being. Immanuel Kant, one of the most influential philosophers in history, took this even further. He argued that consciousness doesn't just passively receive reality, it actively shapes it. The world you experience is structured by your mind. And he wasn't alone. Leibniz, Berkeley, Schopenhauer, Bergson, these are the intellectual titans who marked the era of modern philosophy. And almost all of them agreed on one thing. Consciousness isn't separate from reality. It's fundamental to it. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but that's just philosophy. What about hard science? What about the real world? Fair question, but here's the truth. Most people don't realize the real world you're so certain exists independently. Science has been quietly dismantling that idea for the past century. And it's not just Western thinkers saying this. 3 of the 4 major branches of Buddhism have spent 2,500 years trying to prove one thing. The separate independent self you feel, the me that seems so real, is a fundamental illusion. Zen Buddhism is entirely dedicated to proving that the distinction between me and not me is pure fantasy. Advaita, the mainstream sect of Hinduism, has the same mission, showing that the feeling of being a separate self is fundamentally illusory. So we have the greatest philosophers, the most ancient wisdom traditions, and, as you're about to see, cutting-edge neuroscience, all pointing to the same radical conclusion. Ready to go deeper? Let's get scientific for a moment. I want you to think about how vision actually works. Not the story we tell ourselves, but the actual mechanics happening in your body right now. When you look at something, let's say a piece of butter on the table, here's what happens. Light photons bounce off the butter. Those photons enter your eye. They hit your retina. The retina converts them into electrical signals. Those signals travel through thick neural cables, your optic nerves, straight back into your brain. And here's where it gets wild. Those signals arrive at the back of your brain in a region called the visual cortex. And human physiology textbooks will tell you this. The visual cortex is vast. It's as labyrinthine as the hallways of the Milky Way. It contains as many neurons as there are stars in our galaxy. And this is where colors happen. This is where shapes form. This is where movement occurs. This is where they are perceived. This is where they are cognized, not out there. In here, at the back of your skull, the visual image of that butter, the yellow color, the smooth texture, the rectangular shape exists in only one place inside your brain. That's the only location where visual images are actually perceived. Let me say that again because this is critical. The butter you see, it's not out there on the table. The image of the butter, the only butter you have ever actually experienced, is inside your head right now. Oh, that's its actual location. Now, most people hear this and think, okay, sure, but there's still a real butter out there, right? My brain is just creating a representation of it. And that's where things get even stranger. Because if you can only ever experience the representation, if you have never and can never experience anything outside your consciousness, then in what sense is the external butter real to you? You've never touched it. You've never seen it. You've never tasted it. You've only ever experienced the sensations inside your consciousness. The colors, the textures, the taste, all of it, 100% of it is happening inside your awareness. And suddenly a question emerges. Where exactly is the boundary between you and the universe? Your skin. But your skin is also just a sensation in consciousness. Your body. But your body is also just a collection of feelings, images, and sensations, all experienced inside awareness. Here's what I'm getting at. That universe you think is external. The stars, the galaxies, the vast cosmos, it's not out there at all. It's in here, in consciousness, in awareness, at the back of your brain, in the visual cortex, in the sensory processing centers, in the neural networks where every sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch actually occurs. The universe you experience is located inside you, not metaphorically, literally. And if you've ever had a moment, maybe watching a sunset or holding a newborn baby or staring at the ocean, where it felt like the boundary between you and everything else dissolved, you weren't imagining it. According to a survey published in the New York Times Magazine in 1976, 25% of the population has experienced what they call the unity of everything. 1 in 4 people, you're not alone. You're not crazy. And 40% reported something even more profound. A feeling that love is at the center of everything. A deep and profound peace. A sense that the universe is alive. These aren't hallucinations. These aren't delusions. These are glimpses of what's actually true. But here's where most people get stuck. And this is where we need to go deeper. Because there's another illusion even more fundamental than the location of the universe. And it has to do with who or what is actually in control. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When you make a decision, when you choose to lift your hand or speak a word or think a thought, who's actually making that choice? You'd say, I am, right? That's what it feels like. It feels like there's a you inside your head pulling the levers, making the calls, steering the ship of your life. But what if that's an illusion? Let me tell you about an experiment that changed everything. 25 years ago, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Lee conducted a study that would shake the foundations of free will. Here's what he did. He hooked people up to EEG monitors, machines that measure brain activity. He asked them to do something incredibly simple. At a random moment of their choosing, flex their wrist. That's it. Just decide whenever you want to move your hand. But here's the catch. He also asked them to note the exact moment they felt the conscious decision to move. He had them watch a clock and remember where the hand was when they chose to act. What did he find? The brain showed activity. What's called readiness potential half a second before the person felt they had made the decision. Half a second. Your unconscious brain was already preparing to move your hand before you decided to move it. Think about that. The decision was made. The neural machinery was already in motion. And then only then did consciousness arrive and say, I'm choosing to do this. But you didn't choose. Your brain did. You just experienced the feeling of choosing after the fact. Now, that experiment was conducted decades ago. Maybe you're thinking, okay, half a second, that's not much. Maybe it's a fluke. But then in 2008, researchers went deeper. They started analyzing higher order brain functions and they discovered something stunning. Using advanced brain scans, they could predict which hand a person would raise left or right up to 10 seconds before the person consciously decided. 10 seconds. In the realm of cognitive decisions, 10 seconds is nearly an eternity. And here's Benjamin Lee's conclusion in his own words. The brain makes decisions on a subconscious level. Our sense of personal free will is just a habitual retrospective perspective. Read that again. You don't have free will the way you think you do. You have the feeling of free will. But that feeling comes after the decision has already been made. Even Einstein said it. We can will ourselves to act, but we cannot will ourselves to will. You can want to do something, but you can't want yourself to want it. The wanting arises on its own. And for most people, this is where things get really uncomfortable. Because if the brain is deciding before I am aware of it, then who am I if I'm not the one in control? If my thoughts arise automatically, if my decisions are made before I consciously register them, then what is this self I've been clinging to my whole life? This is the identity crisis. This is the moment where the illusion starts to crack. And I'll be honest with you, I went through this, too. I spent years believing I was in control. White-knuckling my way through life, obsessively trying not to mess up, thinking that if I just tried hard enough, focused enough, controlled enough, I could steer my life in the right direction. But the neuroscience is clear. The brain and mind operate all by themselves. Control. Real conscious control is largely an illusion. And here's the part no one talks about. This realization can feel terrifying. It can feel like the ground is being pulled out from under you. But here's the kicker. It's also the most liberating truth you'll ever encounter. Let me explain. Here's what most people miss. When you discover that control is an illusion, your first reaction is panic. If I'm not in control, then what am I? Just a puppet, a biological robot running on autopilot? But that's not what this means. Let me tell you something. The fact that your brain makes decisions before you're consciously aware of them doesn't mean you're powerless. It doesn't mean you're not responsible. It doesn't mean life is meaningless. It means you can finally stop beating yourself up. Think about it. How much of your life have you spent drowning in guilt, replaying past mistakes, wondering why you said that thing, did that thing, chose that thing? I should have known better. I should have been smarter. I should have had more willpower. But if your brain was already setting the decision in motion before you were even aware of it, then in what sense were you to blame? This isn't an excuse. This isn't a free pass to act carelessly. This is freedom from the obsessive need to avoid messing up. This is permission to be human. Because here's the deeper truth. You don't need to control every thought, every impulse, every decision. Your brain, your body already knows what it's doing. It's been doing it for billions of years of evolution. Clouds form all by themselves. Planets spin all by themselves. Your liver manufactures enzymes all by themselves. Why do we think the mind is any different? The mind operates all by itself, too. Thoughts arise, decisions emerge, actions unfold. And the more you try to grip the steering wheel with white knuckles, the more you suffer. But when you let go, when you trust the process, something miraculous happens. You don't lose yourself, you find yourself. Let me tell you what happened to me. For years, I tried to control my thoughts. I meditated with the goal of quieting my mind. I set intentions. I visualized. I affirmed. And it worked sometimes, but most of the time it felt like pushing a boulder uphill. Then I learned about the Libet experiments. I learned that the brain decides first. And instead of feeling defeated, I felt relief. Relief. Because it meant I could stop trying so hard. I could stop judging myself for intrusive thoughts. I could stop feeling guilty about decisions that were already unfolding before I was even aware of them. And you know what happened? My mind actually got quieter. Not because I was controlling it, but because I stopped fighting it. The universe, the brain, the body, consciousness itself was already doing its thing. And when I stopped resisting, I started flowing. This is what the mystics have been saying forever. This is what Zen means by no self. Not that you don't exist, but that the separate controlling self you think you are, that's the illusion. The real you is the awareness itself. The consciousness that watches thoughts arise and fall, that experiences decisions without clinging to them. And here's the beautiful part. When you stop trying to control, you don't lose responsibility. You gain clarity. Because now, instead of drowning in guilt and regret, you can observe your patterns. You can see how your brain works. You can make adjustments, not through force, but through understanding. You can trust the process. And suddenly, life becomes less of a battle and more of a dance. Now, let me show you something even more profound. That survey I mentioned earlier, the New York Times study from 1976 found that 40% of people reported experiencing something extraordinary. They described it as love at the center of everything, a deep and profound peace, a sense that the universe is alive. And here's what's critical. These experiences almost always happened when thinking stopped. Not when people were meditating for hours. Not when they were doing complex spiritual practices, but in simple moments watching a baby, looking at a pet, standing in nature. Moments when the analytical mind quieted. When the illusion of separation dissolved, when consciousness touched itself directly. And in those moments, people reported feeling something that contradicts everything we've been taught about reality. They felt unified with everything. Not separate, not isolated, not alone, connected, whole, home. And 25% of the population, 1 in 4 people, has felt this. You're not crazy. This is real. This is what happens when the illusion of the separate self drops away even for a moment. You realize you're not a tiny observer inside a vast external universe. You're the universe itself experiencing itself through this particular form. But here's where language starts to break down. Because how do you describe something that exists beyond words? How do you talk about the unity of everything when language is designed to divide things into parts? The word water is not actual water. The word it in it is raining corresponds to nothing. Language is a tool, a useful one, but fundamentally incompatible with the direct experience of reality. This is why you can't fully grasp this with logic alone. You have to go beyond the tools of the thinking process itself, you have to experience it. And that brings us to the real question. If all of this is true, if the universe is located inside consciousness, if control is an illusion, if separation is a myth, then what does this mean for how you live your life? Let's go deeper. So, what does this actually mean for you, not in some abstract philosophical sense, but in your day-to-day life? In the moments when you're struggling, when you're stressed, when you're trying to figure out what the hell you're doing here, let me break this down. If the universe you experience is located inside consciousness, if everything you see, hear, touch, taste, and feel is happening within awareness, then perception becomes everything, not in a woo-woo, manifest your dreams kind of way, in a literal scientific way. Because if reality is a process that involves your consciousness, and that's the first principle of biocentrism by the way, then the way you perceive the world directly shapes the world you experience. Let me give you an example. 2 people can be in the exact same situation, same job, same relationship, same bank account. One person experiences it as a prison, the other experiences it as freedom. What's the difference? Not the external circumstances. The consciousness perceiving those circumstances. One consciousness is caught in the illusion of separation. It believes it's a separate self struggling against an external world trying to control outcomes it can't control. The other consciousness sees through that illusion. It recognizes that the external and internal are not separate. They're 2 sides of the same coin. And that second consciousness, it experiences reality differently. Not because reality changed, but because the lens changed. This is the second principle of biocentrism. External and internal perceptions are inextricably intertwined. They cannot be separated. You are not observing a world outside yourself. You are consciousness experiencing itself. Now here's where this gets practical. Most people live their lives in a constant state of resistance. Resisting what is? Resisting their thoughts. Resisting their emotions. Resisting their circumstances, and that resistance creates suffering. Not because the circumstances are inherently bad, but because the mind is at war with reality. But what if you could drop that resistance? What if you could see that the thoughts arising in your mind, they're not yours in the way you think, they're just phenomena arising in consciousness? What if you could see that the emotions you feel, they're not enemies to be controlled? They're movements of energy passing through awareness. What if you could see that the circumstances you're in, they're not separate from you? They're part of the unified field of consciousness expressing itself. When you see this, really see it, something shifts. You stop fighting. You start flowing. And that's when life becomes less exhausting. Let me tell you about a moment that changed everything for me. I was sitting in my backyard watching my dog play. Just simple ordinary movement, chasing a ball, sniffing the grass. And for a few seconds, maybe 10, maybe 15, my mind went completely quiet. No thoughts about the past, no anxiety about the future, no judgments, no commentary, just presence. And in that moment, the boundary between me and the dog and the grass and the sky disappeared. It wasn't like I became the dog. It was more like there was just experience, just consciousness, just this. No separation. And when my thinking mind came back online, I realized that's what the mystics are talking about. That's the unity experience. Not something you achieve through years of meditation. Though that can help, but something that's always available right here, right now. When thinking stops, when the illusion of the separate self drops away even for a moment, when consciousness touches itself directly. And here's the thing. You've probably experienced this, too. Maybe you just didn't recognize it. Think about the last time you were completely absorbed in something. A piece of music, a work of art, a conversation with someone you love. In those moments, where were you? There was no you separate from the experience. There was just the experience itself. That's it? That's the door. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, but I can't live in that state all the time. I have bills to pay. I have responsibilities. I have a life to manage. And you're right. You can't and shouldn't try to stay in some permanent state of bliss. That's not the point. The point is to recognize the truth underneath the illusion. You are not a separate self struggling in an external universe. You are consciousness itself temporarily experiencing this particular form. And when you see that even intellectually, even as a concept, it changes how you move through the world. You stop taking things so personally. You stop clinging so tightly to outcomes. You stop believing that your worth is tied to your achievements or your failures because you realize the you that's worried about all of that. It's a story, a useful story sometimes, but still just a story. The real you, the awareness beneath the story is untouched, unchanging, eternal. And that awareness, it's the same awareness in everyone, the same consciousness looking out through every pair of eyes. Which means when you hurt someone, you're hurting yourself. When you love someone, you're loving yourself. When you connect with someone, you're connecting with yourself. Because there is no other. There's only this, only consciousness. Only the unified field expressing itself in infinite forms. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying this makes you a saint. I'm not saying you'll never get angry or frustrated or scared. You will because you're human, because the brain still operates the way it operates. But you'll relate to those emotions differently. You'll see them as weather passing through the sky of awareness, not as evidence of your failure, not as proof that you're broken, just as phenomena arising and passing like everything else. And in that spaciousness, you'll find something most people spend their whole lives searching for: peace. Not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of awareness. The recognition that no matter what's happening in the story of your life, the awareness witnessing it all is okay, has always been okay, will always be okay. And that awareness is you. Not the character in the story, but the consciousness reading the story. So, here's my question for you. Where in your life are you still gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles? Where are you still trying to control what can't be controlled? Where are you still believing in the illusion of separation and what would happen if you let go just a little, just enough to see what's on the other side? Because I promise you, it's not chaos. It's not collapse. It's freedom. Ready to go even deeper because what I'm about to share will tie all of this together in a way that might just change how you see death, time, and your own existence. Let me give you the 2 principles that change everything. These are the foundational ideas of biocentrism. The theory that consciousness isn't a byproduct of the universe, but the very thing that creates it. Here's the first principle. What we perceive as reality is a process that involves our consciousness. Read that again. Reality is not a thing out there that you're observing. Reality is a process, a dynamic ongoing event. And that process requires consciousness. Without consciousness, there is no color. There is no sound. There is no texture or taste or smell. There are only wavelengths of light, vibrations in the air, molecules, and atoms. Consciousness is what turns those raw phenomena into the rich lived experience you call the world. And here's the radical part. That means consciousness comes first. Not matter creating consciousness, but consciousness creating the experience of matter. This flips everything. For centuries, science has operated under the assumption that the universe is a giant machine, dead, mechanical, governed by laws that existed before life, before awareness, before anything. And consciousness just an accidental byproduct, a fluke of evolution, a ghost in the machine. But biocentrism says, no, consciousness is primary. The universe you experience, the stars, the planets, the butter on the table, none of it exists independently of the consciousness perceiving it. Which brings us to the second principle. Our external and internal perceptions are inextricably intertwined. They are different sides of the same coin and cannot be separated. Think about what that means. The external world and your internal experience are not 2 separate things. They're one thing, one unified field of consciousness appearing to split into subject and object, observer and observed, me and the universe. But that split is the illusion. In reality, there's no boundary. Your skin is not a wall separating you from the cosmos. It's a sensation in consciousness. Your body is not a container holding your awareness. It's an experience arising within awareness. The universe is not out there. It's in here. Always has been. And suddenly everything makes sense. The reason 25% of people have experienced unity. The reason mystics from every tradition describe the same truth. The reason quantum physics keeps bumping into the role of the observer. Because it's all pointing to the same thing. Consciousness is not in the universe. The universe is in consciousness. You are not a small isolated being lost in a vast and indifferent cosmos. You are the cosmos itself experiencing itself from this unique perspective. And when you see that, really see it, the fear of death starts to dissolve. Because if consciousness is primary, if it exists outside of time like entangled particles in quantum theory, then what does death even mean? The body dies, the brain stops. But consciousness may not be bound by time at all. It may be eternal, infinite, the ground of all being. And you are that. Not the character, not the story, not the separate self, but the awareness itself, the consciousness that has always been and will always be. This is the truth, and it's been hiding in plain sight your entire life. So, where does this leave you? You've just spent the last half hour having your reality turned inside out. The universe isn't external, it's internal. Control is an illusion. Free will is more mysterious than you thought. Separation is a myth. You are not separate from the cosmos. You are the cosmos. Now, here's what I want you to understand. This isn't just intellectual knowledge. This isn't something you add to your collection of interesting facts and then move on. This is an invitation. An invitation to see through the illusion you've been living in your whole life. An invitation to stop fighting reality and start flowing with it. An invitation to recognize who and what you really are. Not the character in the story, but the awareness reading it. Not the wave on the ocean, but the ocean itself. Not a fragment of consciousness, but consciousness itself experiencing this particular form. And when you live from that recognition even a little bit, everything changes. You stop taking things so personally because you realize there's no separate person to take offense. You stop clinging to outcomes because you see that the brain will do what it does and your job is to trust the process. You stop feeling isolated and alone because you recognize that the same consciousness looking out through your eyes is looking out through everyone's eyes. And maybe, just maybe, you start to experience those moments of unity more often. Those moments when thinking stops, when the boundaries dissolve, when you feel connected to everything, not as a distant goal, but as the natural state you've been covering up with thoughts and resistance and the illusion of a separate self. So, here's my question for you. If something in this video resonated with you, if you felt a spark of recognition, a sense of yes, this is true, drop one word in the comments. Just one word that captures your energy right now. And if you're ready to go deeper, if you want to keep exploring these ideas, keep questioning the nature of reality, keep dissolving the illusions that keep you stuck, hit that subscribe button because this is episode 5 in our Quantum Consciousness series. And we're just getting started. We've explored where the universe is located. We've dismantled the illusion of control. We've seen through the myth of separation. But here's where it gets even wilder. In episode 6, we're going to tackle something that might be the biggest illusion of all. Something so fundamental to your experience that you've never questioned it. Something that shapes every moment of your life, yet doesn't exist the way you think it does. I'll give you one hint. It's not space. We've already covered that. It's something else. Something you can't escape. Something you're experiencing right now in this very moment. Check the description below for the full playlist and the link to episode 6. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Until then, remember this. The universe you see, the stars, the galaxies, the vast infinite cosmos is not out there. It's in here, in consciousness, in you. You are not in the universe. The universe is in you. And that changes everything. I'll see you in the next one.